The story begins with the couple Dale and Erica, who are hiking through a forested area. Erica doesn't like waking up early and complains the whole time, in addition to suspecting that Dale is lost. He denies this suspicion and insists on the outing, saying that in the city they can never enjoy nature. However, he himself starts to find the total silence strange and notices that there is not even the sound of birds. When Erica steps away for a moment, he takes the opportunity to check the map and then realizes that his foot is on something disgusting. He is horrified to see a hideous tangle of bones and entrails, apparently from animals, right in front of him. Erica is also startled by this, and he calls the authorities, informing them that there must have been an accident nearby. It is then that both notice something moving towards them, accompanied by the sound of hooves at high speed. The couple runs in the opposite direction, unable to see what they are fleeing from, until Erica runs into a tree. Luckily, the animal also seems to have an accident before reaching them, and falls lifeless to the ground, just a few meters away. Dale discovers it was a deer, and sees that it was already quite injured before this collision, as if it had been attacked by something. When the sound of the birds is finally heard, they flap their wings frantically, and there are so many that the sky seems to darken. We then meet Richard Vineyard, who is going camping with his family, although he is the only one excited about the outing. His son Danny is upset because he doesn't want to travel without his dog Oscar, who has been missing for a week. Sadie is his teenage daughter who doesn't really like eco-outings, and also teases Cynthia, Richard's wife. Cynthia herself questions his decision to impose this trip on everyone, doubting that it will help improve the mood. Even so, she makes an effort to cooperate and comforts Danny, saying that the neighbor can take care of Oscar for a few days if the dog returns well now. Excited about the idea, he goes to pack the food bowls while Sadie finally says goodbye to her friend, who is actually eyeing Richard. The Vineyards hit the road on Friday morning and soon arrive at Pinewoods Park in New Jersey. The place is special for Richard, as his grandfather used to take the whole family to the park when they came from England. According to the camping brochures, that area was the scene of many conflicts between the Lenni Lenape tribes, and the only thing that united them was the fear they had of a mythical being known as the Jersey Devil. Seeing Danny's terrified expression, Richard quickly says that all of that is just a legend. He also begins to get annoyed, seeing that everyone is on their cell phones, and decides to ban electronics during the outing. Sadie gets furious about this and starts to complain, but the argument is interrupted by a deer that suddenly appears in the middle of the road. Richard ends up hitting it, and is shaken by what he sees when he goes out to check, as it is clear that something horrible happened to that animal before it collided with him. A series of noises begin to come from behind the bushes around him, alarming Richard, but he can't see what it is. Disobeying his orders, Sadie gets out of the car to have a look as well and is shaken by the scene. A little later, the family arrives at the parking lot, and a guard named Bob greets them, explaining the general rules. Richard takes the opportunity to mention the injured deer and says that the animal had even lost its antlers. Bob suspects that this is the fault of a man named Wyatt Barron, who lives nearby. He fenced his house with barbed wire, and this has been a problem for the deer that gets stuck on it. Richard talks to the guard without taking his eyes off his daughter, who is already making friends with boys Zach and Ryan. But Bob regains his attention when he recommends great caution with food, due to an incident that occurred the other day with a bear. Richard says that there are no bears in the park, and Bob denies this information, but assures him that they are very few, and there is no danger. The family then goes to the camping area, and Richard is furious to see that it is full of messy people who can't detach from their screens. This was not what he was looking for when he planned this trip, and these setbacks are making Richard increasingly nervous. When he goes to teach Danny how to set up the tent, a traumatic memory suddenly invades his mind and he starts to feel sick. Cynthia rushes to help him, worried about an injury he has on his arm, and gradually manages to calm him down. That night, she invites him to join the others around the campfire, and he reluctantly agrees, just to accompany her. Several other visitors are already eating treats and sharing camping stories when the two arrive. Richard recounts the deer incident, and Zach takes the opportunity to start the traditional horror tales, while his friend Dave says he'll go to the bathroom and be right back. Ryan joins in and begins to tell the story of Mother Leeds, a single mother who had 12 children from different fathers. Despite the general disapproval in the village, many people helped care for the children as Leeds was very poor and lived in a shack in the woods. However, one day, the village leaders put an end to the situation and prohibited her from having more children, under threat of being banished. Knowing she couldn't care for her brood without the help of the villagers, Leeds agreed to the ultimatum. Everything went well for some time until she fell ill and locked herself in the shack for several months. Suspicious, some villagers surprised her with a visit and upon discovering she was pregnant, decreed her expulsion as soon as the baby was born. Leeds claimed not to know how this happened and cursed everyone, even offering the newborn to the devil. Perhaps because of that, what was born of her was not a human baby, but rather a monstrous creature that soon spread its wings and attacked the siblings, killing two right off the bat. Mother Leeds herself was the next victim, and her demonic son was free to spread terror in the forest ever since. As soon as the story ends, Dave returns to the circle with a scary mask and frightens everyone, as the three boys had planned from the beginning. The prank is really very lame, but Richard reacts so aggressively that everyone ends up being more shocked by his short fuse than annoyed by the trick. Back at the tent, Cynthia says he overreacted and he apologizes, embarrassed for losing control. That night, he has a terrible nightmare about a winged beast chasing him through a field. He wakes up standing in the middle of the forest, far from the tent, with Cynthia very worried at his side. When her phone starts to vibrate, Richard becomes furious upon seeing that the call is from a man named Brian and throws the cell phone away. Swearing that he never cheated on her, she complains about this excessive jealousy that has forced her away from her own friends since she married him. Succumbing to his affection, Richard apologizes again and decides to take a walk to clear his head. Soon after, a majestic deer appears that enchants him, but the encounter is ruined by a sudden thud and a wave of spine-chilling whispers. Investigating the cause of the noise, Richard sees that it was another horned deer, which however strangely falls from the top of a tree. In the morning, he wakes up with his arm much worse, takes several pills at once, and frowns when he discovers that his daughter went for a walk with Ryan. Moreover, Zach seems to have disappeared during the night, and there is a policeman at the campsite questioning everyone. Growing increasingly frustrated, Richard decides to leave the designated camping area for a quieter place, ignoring Cynthia's objections. Sadie also gets annoyed when she returns from the outing, and Sheriff Winters takes the opportunity to speak with Richard while he packs everything. There is a heavy urn in the middle of the stuff, and he explains to Winters that it is his father's ashes, which he intends to scatter in the park. Saying that Richard was seen in the woods at dawn, the sheriff asks if he saw Zach or anything that could help find the boy. Cynthia is upset to hear her husband lie about not leaving the tent, especially when Winters hands back her cell phone. After he leaves, the family finishes packing their belongings, and all follow Richard towards Oswego Point, a more secluded part of the park. They take a break when Danny says he needs to go, and we see Zach's body lying nearby, but no one sees him. Hours later, the four are still walking. Danny is complaining about sore feet, and Cynthia suspects Richard is lost. He assures everyone that Oswego Point is just ahead, and they proceed until Sadie hears a radio playing music. They find an abandoned campsite with strange artifacts hanging above the tent, and Sadie starts screaming when she sees a dog's carcass. Cynthia is startled when Richard decides to set up the tents right there, even with the children scared, but he points out that the clouds are getting heavy and it is dangerous to keep walking. She gets a bit tense seeing him take a knife from his pocket, and he explains that he will untie the dog's rope to then get it out of there. Doing so, his mind fills up again with flashes from the past, this time with images of Oscar barking aggressively. At the same time, Sadie discovers that the other side of the abandoned tent is all torn, as if something had attacked the occupants. Richard is still at the riverbank when something falls into the water, and several rocks begin to loosen from a cliff at the same time. Already very disturbed, he gets even more agitated with each scare until Ryan appears out of nowhere. He says that Sadie explained the way by message, as the two are planning to take a walk, which makes Richard very angry. Trying to frighten the boy, he starts telling another version of the story of Mother Leeds, and says that she drowned her 13th child in the stream as part of a demonic pact. Someone saw her and tried to prevent the tragedy, but the baby disappeared from the water before being saved. Then Richard reveals that, on one of his childhood outings in this park, he thought he saw the terrible creature himself. The storm starts, and Cynthia is reading to Danny when she hears a commotion in the other tent. Richard is emptying Sadie's bag in the mud to confiscate the cell phone, and even pushes the girl hard due to how out of control he is. Losing her patience, Cynthia pressures him to tell her what is going on, and he confesses that he is seeing things. Furthermore, his arm is getting worse, and he seems to have a fever. Cynthia then says that they need to leave as soon as the rain passes, and that she will take him to a hospital. She also returns the cell phone to Sadie, but she says that Ryan is not answering her calls. Richard finds a notebook with macabre drawings in the abandoned tent, and Cynthia scolds him for messing with other people's things, but that is nothing compared to the confession he makes next. He says that he sacrificed Oscar without anyone knowing, since the dog had been acting aggressively for almost a month, and even bit him. Cynthia realizes that the injury on his arm is from that bite, and as a nurse, she begins to suspect that Oscar passed rabies to him. The rain only stops when it is already too dark for walking, so the family is forced to camp for another night. Sadie thinks it is very strange to be ignored by her crush, and tells her stepmother that she will try to look for him, promising not to stray too far. Still trying Ryan's number, she hears his cell phone ringing, and even sees the screen light up in the distance, but something jumps almost on top of her in the middle of the way. Screaming, she runs back to the tents and asks Cynthia for help, who tries to call someone unsuccessfully. Seeing that Richard is very ill, she tries to get him to take a sleeping medication, but he slaps the water away, always swinging between aggression and regret. Cynthia decides to spend the night in the children's tent, promising that they will leave there when the sun rises. Richard sleeps very badly, and his nightmares intertwine with reality in a chilling vision, where the forest is covered in fog, and the feared monster appears behind him. Hearing his scream, Cynthia leaves the tent, and we see that the woods are indeed under dense fog. She finds him lying on the ground, trembling and saying he saw the devil. No matter how much she says this is the effect of the illness, he insists that it was a real encounter, which only terrifies her even more. With no choice, she tells the children the truth about Oscar and explains that their father needs to be taken to the emergency room as soon as possible. They pack everything quickly, and Richard also tries to cooperate, following the rest with a lot of effort. Then Cynthia manages to call for emergency help and tries to explain where they are, but then she hears Danny scream. She and Cynthia panic upon realizing that the other two are no longer there. The two start calling them, and they are shocked to stumble upon what is left of Ryan. The phone starts ringing, and Sheriff Winters says that the center passed on the message. Cynthia does everything she can to communicate clearly, despite her despair, and informs that there is a body in the woods. Seeing the father's knife lying on the ground, Sadie starts crying and asks Cynthia if he could have done this. It is right at that moment that Danny screams again, and the two run towards the sound, finding the boy floating in a lake. They fear the worst upon seeing him unconscious, but Cynthia manages to save him with CPR, and Sadie is so relieved that she doesn't even notice the silent approach of their father. But when Cynthia sees him, she lunges at him without mercy, and unleashes all the rage she has held since Friday. Richard's visions mix the image of his furious wife with that of the rabid dog, and he suddenly retaliates, breaking her leg. Cynthia falls to the side, screaming in pain, while Richard's expression begins to change, as if he were realizing what he did. With not a shred of patience for this back-and-forth regret, Sadie knocks out her father with a tree branch. At the same time, Winters is returning to the park with the sirens on, and already puts the search dogs out as soon as he arrives. He tells Bob that Richard mentioned Oswego Point, and the guard explains to him which trails lead there. Meanwhile, Sadie takes control of the situation, tying her father to a tree trunk and helping her stepmother as best she can. She says she will leave with Danny, planning to walk straight until she finds someone. Cynthia agrees, asking that she not let go of Danny's hand and comes back if it starts to get dark. Then Richard regains his senses and pleads with his children to free him, but the two run off without listening to him. Very distressed, he screams that the forest is not safe, but falls silent when he remembers what he did to his wife's leg. She also asks what happened to Danny, as the boy could only say that something pushed him into the lake, and tells that he found Ryan's body. Richard blames the Jersey Devil for all of this and continues asking her to let him go, as the thing could be lurking to attack at any moment. Cynthia refuses to help him, and he is horrified when she says that the only monster there is him. Nearby, Winters and his team find Zach's body and deduce that this could not have been any kind of bear. Sadie asks her brother who took him to the lake, and he says that their father was looking for a hiding place, afraid of something that was supposedly pursuing them. Cynthia bites a branch and adjusts the bone in her own leg, almost fainting from pain. Then Richard sees the devil's wings appearing behind the foliage and tries to make her look in that direction, but she does not hear. He states that this is not his first encounter with that being, and claims that the Jersey Devil has been pursuing him since childhood. Desperation gives him the strength to break free from the tree, and Cynthia hears the rope snapping. Richard starts to get close to her, almost in tears and swearing that he only wants to protect her, but she hits him with a rock. Sadie is still running through the forest with her brother when she trips and hurts her leg. When she gets up, she calls Danny to keep walking, but sees that he is almost hypnotized, staring fixedly at a point in the woods. She becomes terrified when the leaves start to move, and a fierce roar gets louder and louder. The animal is a wild feline, and Sadie tells Danny to stay still, hoping that will save them. But what really saves them is the shot from a rifle, as a lone hunter was passing by and decided to help the siblings. Upon finding Ryan's remains, along with Richard's knife, Winters orders the entire park to be closed and evacuates all active camps at the moment. Richard is still unconscious after Cynthia's blow, who tries to stand up with difficulty when a shadow suddenly looms over her. The police are already at the abandoned campsite at this moment and thus hear her scream. Sadie also hears it and goes back there with her brother and the hunter, finding Richard already awake but still having confusing visions. She asks her father where their stepmother is, and he replies that he doesn't know. But soon, Cynthia appears crawling and more injured than before. Facing this scene, the hunter realizes that Richard is the villain of the story and immediately points his gun at him. Danny runs to his mother, and a moment of distraction costs the hunter dearly, as Richard seizes the chance to overpower him. The gun accidentally goes off, alerting the police who are almost arriving, and the two fight until the devil appears again, and Richard gathers his strength to win the fight, striking the hunter and stealing his gun. However, now his family is already gone, and the creature's screams are getting farther away, which means they could be in danger. Now both Richard and the police are searching the woods to find Cynthia and the children, who are practically crawling. Richard finds them first, and Sadie is shocked to find herself in the crosshairs of the rifle. But it is then that Cynthia looks to the side and sees two clawed feet. Sadie also hears the screams when she stops screaming and slowly turns her back, incredulous to see the devil right behind her. Unfortunately, Winters does not see the monster from where he is when the police finally surround Richard. Bob is the only one who sees and shouts for them not to shoot, but then Richard himself pulls the trigger, trying to take down the monster. Winters responds to this with a shot as well, hitting Richard seconds before facing the devil. Bob runs away while the sheriff is devoured, and Cynthia crawls to her husband, regretting not having believed him. The two hold hands until the shadow of a gigantic pair of wings covers the family, plunging into the sky, towards Richard. A few weeks later, Sadie and Bob gather a group and enter the forest to hunt the creature and put an end to this terror.